Okay, let's talk about ethos, pathos, and logos, also known as the three appeals. So we've already talked a little bit about what these words mean. Let's talk about them more in depth. So first of all, what are they? Well, they're ways to persuade your audience when you argue. Who came up with them? Well, Aristotle didn't invent them, but he analyzed the way that people argue and named the three main ways that people try and persuade people. So we're going to look at these one at a time and talk about what they are. Ethos. Ethos is when you're trying to convince your audience that you're knowledgeable and trustworthy, that they should listen to you about your subject. So how do texts persuade using ethos? Well, first of all, they use good sources. So they show that they've done their research, that they are knowledgeable on whatever issue it is that they're talking about. Other ways they do it, authors or directors or whomever it is, they show their credentials, their expertise in the subject, what qualifies them to talk about this subject. Things like college degrees, research, publications, personal experience, all of those things go into showing that you are an expert on this subject. Make points that are unbiased. So being respectful goes into ethos, showing the other side of an argument and being respectful towards it. And that goes into examining multiple viewpoints, saying, don't take my word for it. Here's other people who agree with me. Here's other people who disagree with me, but I want you to hear from them too and make your own decision. So those are other ways to establish ethos. As I mentioned before, being respectful when showing those other opinions, those other viewpoints that disagree with you. So here's an easy way to remember ethos. So I've got two people on this slide. Hopefully you can name the guy on the left. That's Stephen Hawking. I'm sure you can name the woman on the right. This is Kim Kardashian. So, to get an idea of ethos, I want to ask you, if you had to do a science report, which of these two people would you ask? Pretty obvious, right? You're going to ask Stephen Hawking. Why? Well, because of his expertise, because you trust him to know about science. You know, he's a scientist and a cosmologist and a physicist. He's, one of the most brilliant men in the world. So that's his thing. So that's why you're going to trust him to know about science. But if you had to design a dress, or if you had to pick out an outfit for an event, which of these two people would you trust? So you might not be crazy about Kim Kardashian's style, but of these two people, she's definitely more of an expert on fashion than Stephen Hawking is. So ethos is not always about who's the smartest. It's just about who's the expert based on this topic. So here's another little example. I've got this picture here that says trusted sources of, well, information. If you're looking for trustworthy sources on information, a library has ethos. Trusted sources of sweat. Athletes, runners, obviously they're trusted sources for that. For cookies, if you want good cookies, grandma probably makes good cookies. So this idea of ethos has to do with where do you go to get information that's trustworthy on whatever topic it is that you're looking at. And that's what, when a text is trying to establish ethos to persuade you, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, I know about this. I'm trustworthy when it comes to this topic. Some real world examples of ethos. So if you like Lil Wayne, then if he comes out and says, hey, this new rapper who just came out, he's awesome. You trust his opinion. You're much more likely to go out and buy that CD or download it from iTunes. We're not in the Stone Age anymore. So you're going to do that because you trust him as a source, a reliable source of what is good music. So if you want to know who's going to win the big game this weekend, you might go to the ESPN website or watch ESPN on TV. Why? Because those guys, this is all they do, is they study the statistics. They look at the different players. They know about them. They're usually pretty good at figuring out who's going to win. When it comes to movies, you don't want to waste your $9 on a crappy movie. So where do you go to figure out if the new movie coming out this weekend is worth your money to go see? Rotten Tomatoes is one example. Any kind of movie review website or reviewers posting online, those are trustworthy sources for telling you whether or not a movie is going to be good and whether or not you should waste your time to go see it. So all of this has to do with ethos, with credibility and trustworthiness based on the topic. Here's our ethos writing example, and this comes from Martin Luther King from Letter from a Birmingham Jail. My dear fellow clergymen, while confined here in Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. Since I feel that you are men of genuine goodwill and that your criticisms are sincerely set forth, I want to try to answer your statement in what I hope will be patient and reasonable terms. So already we can see the ethos here. He's being so respectful. You know, these are people who said he shouldn't have come here. He deserves to be in jail for what he's done. He could be mad about this. He could be a jerk, but that's not going to win them over to his side. So he's being very respectful and saying, your criticisms are sincere. You're men of genuine goodwill. I think I should indicate why I'm here in Birmingham, since you have been influenced by the view which argues against outsiders coming in. I, along with several members of my staff, am here because I was invited here. I am here because I have organizational ties here. So he's saying, not you're wrong, but this isn't your fault. You've been influenced by these other views. He's giving quotes in both of these paragraphs from what other people have said. So he's showing, I know what's being said about me, and I'm going to respond. I've done my research. And then he's saying, I was invited here. I have organizational ties here. This is my credibility. I didn't just come here on a whim. Here's why I'm here. But more basically, I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. Just as the prophets of the 8th century BC left their villages and carried their "Thus saith the Lord" far beyond the boundaries of their hometowns, and just as the Apostle Paul left his village of Tarsus and carried the gospel of Jesus Christ to the far corners of the Greco-Roman world, so am I compelled to carry the gospel of freedom beyond my own hometown. Like Paul, I must constantly respond to the Macedonian call for aid. So here he's saying, I am a fighter against injustice. I am like the prophets. I am like Paul. So he's taking someone who already has ethos in the audience's eyes and saying, I'm doing the same thing these guys did. So he's linking his ethos to these other people who already have ethos. Pathos. Pathos is an emotional appeal. You're trying to tug at your audience's heartstrings, using real or hypothetical examples that make people feel realistic emotions, sympathy, fear, guilt, desire, all of these. Any emotional reaction is going to be related to pathos. Using emotionally charged statements is another example of pathos. So things that project into the future or demand action are always pathos appeals. Things like, we must act now, there's no time to lose. If we don't make a change, there's no hope for our children. If we don't come together, we will not survive as a nation. All of this is trying to stir up emotions in the audience. Let's talk about when pathos goes bad, because what I said before is elicits realistic emotions. Now, that's when pathos is done well. Just because something contains pathos doesn't mean it's good pathos. So you would want to analyze that within your text. If it's used poorly and it's not persuasive, that's bad pathos. So let's look at some examples. So if the topic that your text is talking about is the death penalty, here's bad pathos. One day there might be no one left on earth because we were all wrongfully put to death in the electric chair. That's bad pathos because it's just dumb. That's not realistic. That's never going to happen. It's not within the realm of possibility. It's just stupid, and it's just trying to make people afraid of something that could never happen. Here's a better example that keeps that same idea. One day it might be you sitting in that chair waiting to be electrocuted for a crime you didn't commit. Now, even though this isn't likely, it's still possible. It still happens to some people. So this is a good example of getting people to feel something emotional using these kinds of statements. Here's another bad example based on abortion. Women who have abortions know they are murderers and their dead babies hate them. So this is bad on a lot of different levels. First of all, it implies that women who have abortions believe that abortion is murder, which is not the case necessarily. It implies, again, that a fetus is a baby, that they are the same thing, which again is something that people argue about in the abortion debate. It's not a fact. It's something that is still up in the air for discussion. That the babies hate them. You know, again, this is just ridiculous on multiple levels. This is bad pathos. So if your text is doing something like this, you want to write that it's bad. When you write your own arguments, you don't want to include things like this. Here's a good example of pathos with the topic of abortion. Women who have abortions must face their decision every day, and some regret it for the rest of their lives. So this is accurate. This is something that is likely, and it still tugs on the audience's heartstrings, but it does it in a way that's realistic. Real-world pathos examples. So when they show internet dating sites with these pictures of happy couples, they're holding hands, it's got, you know, the date they were married, that sort of thing. That is pathos because it wants the people who see those ads to go, I want to find my soulmate too. I should go to that website and sign up so I can find my soulmate. It's wanting to elicit that desire to have whatever's being shown, to meet that special person. So that's playing on pathos. Ads that show poor, starving children in foreign countries and then ask for donations. They're trying to make you feel bad. You're sitting there watching TV on your couch, comfortable. Look at these poor, starving children. Don't you want to help them? Again, that's kind of playing on your guilt. They want you to feel bad, and that's pathos. DUI public service announcements that show people drinking and driving and then accidentally dying horrible deaths or killing someone else as a result. They do this for DUIs, they do it for texting, they do it for drugs, they do it for a lot of things. Not to say that the information that they show is inaccurate, but they often use scare tactics. They want you to be scared. They want you to see what could happen, and they want the images they show you to be so frightening that you're not going to drink and drive or text and drive or do drugs. All of these are playing on your emotional reactions to what you're being told and shown. In writing, here's our pathos example. The Redskins, along with baseball teams like the Atlanta Braves, the Cleveland Indians, and the Kansas City Chiefs, should find other names that avoid highlighting ethnicity. The noble symbols of the Redskins, or college football's Florida State Seminoles, are meant to be strong and proud. Yet, ultimately, the practice of using people as mascots is dehumanizing. Tomahawk chops and war chants belittle an entire race's sacred heritage. How long does anyone think the name Washington Blackskins would last? Or how about the New York Jews? So here's what this writing example is doing. It's saying, here is an ethnicity of people. They're noble and strong and proud. And when we take these people and use them as mascots for sports teams, it's dehumanizing. So dehumanizing is a very emotional word. We feel that when we read it. It means stripping away the human nature of someone and looking at them as a thing instead of a human. And so we're supposed to feel bad for these Native Americans. Then it says, tomahawk chops, war chants, belittle an entire race's sacred heritage. So again, we're supposed to see that and go, oh, wow, that's horrible if that's really what's happening. And then this last couple of sentences, the Washington Blackskins, the New York Jews, the writer wants you to read that and go, that's horribly offensive. No one should do something like that. And he's trying to link your angry, offended reaction to these names to names like the Florida State Seminoles and the Atlanta Braves. He's saying, if this upsets you, the others should upset you as well. So again, this is playing on your emotions. It's trying to make you feel bad for these Native Americans who are being used as college mascots. All right, logos, our final appeal. What is it? A logical appeal where you're being persuaded by facts and reasoning. So how do texts do it? Sound reasoning, credible research, things like statistics, evidence, testimony, eyewitness testimony, that sort of thing, real examples. All of this is going into logically showing why you should agree with the text's opinion. So here are real-world logos examples. Al Gore showing charts and graphs and pictures that map trends in global warming. So if you've seen An Inconvenient Truth, he's got that PowerPoint slide and he's showing you pictures, he's showing you graphs, he's showing you all of this evidence. And what he's doing is he's not relying on ethos alone. He's not saying, don't take my word for it just because I was the vice president. He's saying, look at the evidence, look at the facts. The NRA displaying statistics that show crime rates going down around the same time when gun laws become more lenient. They're saying, look at what happens when you let more people buy guns. Now the criminals are afraid that if they rob someone, that person might have a gun and might turn around and shoot them. So they're not just saying everyone should have a gun just because. They're saying more guns leads to fewer crimes based on our research, our evidence. Medical documentation. So, for example, from the documentary Super Size Me, Morgan Spurlock, the guy who does that experiment in that documentary, he's not just eating McDonald's and going, oh, I feel so bad, take my word for it. He's showing you the data from his cholesterol results that he's getting, blood pressure, body fat tests. He's getting this medical documentation to show the effects on his body so that he can prove what's happening to him. Here's our logos writing example. More than half of police officers admit to being involved in racial profiling at least once during their careers in law enforcement. The practice of racial profiling undercuts a good idea that needs more support from both society and the law. Individuals should be judged by public authorities on the basis of their own conduct and not on the basis of racial generalization. The point here is that racial equality costs something. Politicians suggest that all Americans need to do in order to attain racial justice is forswear bigotry. But they must also demand equal treatment before the law, even when unequal treatment is defensible in the name of non-racist goals. Alright, so let's break this paragraph down and talk about how it's using logos. So first of all, we've got that research, that evidence. More than half of police officers are involved in racial profiling. So that's our research, our evidence that's showing us that this is happening on a regular basis. Now, to convince us that it's wrong, he argues reasonably and logically this statement. Individuals should be judged by public authorities on the basis of their own conduct and not on the basis of racial generalization. That sounds reasonable. It sounds like it's been logically thought out. It makes sense. And then he gets into talking about the fact that racial profiling can help solve crimes. He said, this unequal treatment is defensible in the name of non-racist goals. We all want to live in a society that's free of crime. Of course we do. But what he's saying is it's not worth it. That the problems that come, the racial equality or inequality that comes from what happens when you let police racially profile is not worth the benefits that we gain by solving a few crimes and getting a few criminals off the street. So again, logos, it's easy when you've got numbers and statistics. It's a little trickier sometimes when you're looking at these logical, rational statements. But it's those kinds of statements that you hear and you go, oh yeah, I get it now. I like to call them light bulb moments. When someone says something in such a way that you go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. So if you have that reaction to something a text says, it's probably logos. It's probably that kind of reasoning. So you can think back to our Huey and Riley examples from our Boondocks episode. Those kinds of moments, those are your logos when it comes to logic and reasoning. So let's talk about the opposite of logic for just a second. Logical fallacies. So just like the way that pathos can go wrong, logos can go wrong too. Logical fallacies are flaws in reasoning. They lead to faulty, illogical statements. They happen when a writer or a text makes accidental errors in reasoning or jumps to conclusion based on bias. So sometimes you might be analyzing a text and see it's got some faulty logic here. It sounds logical on the surface, but when you analyze it, it really isn't. Texts avoid them by using carefully thought out, unbiased reasoning. So you don't want to let that bias in there. If your texts have bias, probably something is going wrong. Here are some common types of logical fallacies. If we can put humans on the moon, we should be able to cure the common cold. Why is this a logical fallacy? Well, because it's comparing apples and oranges. It's not the same thing at all. Getting into space is an amazing feat, but it's not the same as, virology. They're just two completely different branches of science that do not relate at all. When Obama or Bush or whoever you want to throw in here became president, the economy plummeted. Therefore, our economic problems are all his fault. This sounds really biased, first of all, and also doesn't take into account all the different things that affect the economy. Who has the biggest effect on the economy? We do, consumers. The economy goes down when consumers stop buying things. So again, this is giving way too much blame to one person. Works the same way if you say the economy started booming. If you say when so-and-so became president, the economy started booming, therefore this person is a great president. Well, no, you're not looking at all the information. So this has to do with taking things out of context and not understanding the way the system works. Murders are increasing, so we must strictly enforce the death penalty. This is a logical fallacy because it assumes that if we use the death penalty more, those people who were going to commit those murders will go, well, gee, I don't want to be executed. Maybe I shouldn't kill this person. And the research doesn't really back that up. It's not very conclusive about whether or not the death penalty is actually a deterrent. So again, when you make a statement, it needs to be supported by the facts that are out there. So you want to take this into account when you're looking at your texts. The logos that they're giving you, is it logical? Is it reasonable? Is it factual or not? So to sum up these persuasive techniques, logos, it's logical reasoning, uses facts and data and those kinds of things to support the argument. Pathos is all about emotion, using emotion to try and get you to agree with the author or the text. And ethos is about credibility of the writer, the author, the director, whoever's involved, trying to get you to feel that that person is credible and trustworthy on that subject. Alright, so here is your writing activity. I want you to demonstrate your understanding of ethos, pathos, and logos by finding one example of each appeal in your homework readings. So that means one of ethos, one of pathos, one of logos. Now, when you do your readings, because we're still getting used to what these different appeals are and how to spot them, you might have a hard time picking some of them out. If that happens, I want you to tell me what could that writer have said to demonstrate that particular appeal. Now, don't do this for all three because that's just lazy. You gotta find at least one of them. Probably you can find two pretty easily. If you've got one that you're struggling with and you're like, man, I just cannot find an example of this in the reading, then again, go back and look at what is the definition of that appeal and how do texts and authors use it, and then tell me what could have been included in one of those essays to demonstrate that particular appeal. Alright, so as always, if you're doing this activity and you're struggling with it, or you have questions, or you're just not sure about something, you can send me an email and I'll get back to you. So do this activity. It's going to be due in class, in our next class period. We'll talk about it. And if you're struggling with ethos, pathos, and logos, again, we're going to talk about it more over the upcoming weeks. So I'm going to help you get those ideas cemented in your mind. So this concludes our ethos, pathos, logos lecture.